Welcome, and thank you for joining Bob and I today on UDTV. Our commitment is to journey with you and ask questions about how, as people living with diabetes, we can transform our lives from a common to uncommon diabetic life. Before we get started, I need to remind you that the content we discuss on UDTV is provided for information and education purposes only. So check with your doctor and healthcare professionals before you make any changes to your routines. Today, Bob and I are going to discuss with Shay how we can best balance a busy life with diabetes. So let me give you some insight into Shae Ayris. She is an artist, advocate, and uncommon diabetic. Shay was born in British Columbia and was brought up with bears visiting her backyard, birds nesting in the trees, frogs and turtles inhabiting ponds and lakes all around, and all manner of life continuing on before her eyes. She fell in love with nature and watching the wildlife living and moving forward in life. Shay started sketching and creating at a young age, as she was brought up in a very creative household. And with this support, she has developed her passion for art and her skill into a career as an artist. Her mindset is on capturing moments in a fantastical setting where reality and magic can meet. Along with her art, Shay has a few causes that she is passionate about. As a type 1 diabetic, she is focused on raising awareness and eradicating ignorance surrounding diabetes, and also serving as an advocate for those also challenging diabetes. Her second cause is to support and work with wildlife foundations for the preservation and protection of endangered species and environments. Shay is definitely uncommon, as she juggles her busy young life of being an artist, an advocate, all while living with and challenging diabetes. So I'm looking forward to our discussion today about how she balances her busy life and diabetes. Shay, thanks for joining Bob and I today on UDTV. How are you doing today, Shay? Well, we're just experiencing a little bit of sound difficulties, so just hang on a second, Shay. Just unmute. Is
that better?
There we go. Now we're rolling.
Perfect.
Excellent. So welcome, Shay. Thanks so much for joining us today in our audience with Uncommon Diabetic TV.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's always nice to talk about things with people and get some things out there.
Shay, maybe we can start with your diabetes. Everybody's got a great story to tell. Like the diabetics I know, maybe you can tell our viewers when you got diabetes, how you discovered it, how it impacted you right off the bat.
Yeah. So I have an entire household full of diabetics. My dad's diabetic, my sister's diabetic, and when I was a kid, I went to diabetic camp with my sister before I was diabetic, and actually wished for it because I didn't get to do all the cool things they were doing. And lo and behold, my 6th birthday, I was diagnosed with diabetes. So got my wish, I guess. But yeah, there's quite a few of us in the household. My mom's, when we were growing up, was pretty overrun with us.
Yeah, that's a lot. That's actually a lot.
That's kind of my story a little bit. Yeah, it's a lot of work for someone, especially when they're the only one that's not technically diabetic in our group. Yeah.
When you first were diagnosed with it, were you happy you got it, or were you just part of the normal household activities now?
For that age, I think I didn't really quite understand what was being taken on there in a lifestyle setting. And especially, nothing can really stop that from happening. People don't really know exactly why it happens quite yet. So being my birthday and then being in the hospital and nurses feeling bad for you and bringing you presents, kind of you're sitting there as a 6-year-old going, this is the best day ever. Yeah. And then my family's like, this is the worst day ever. And so it's kind of not really a thought in your head that it's a bad thing when you're that age.
Yeah. Well, the truth,
right? Other than you have to poke yourself.
Yeah, well, the truth is we don't really understand what we're getting ourselves into, no matter what age it is when we became a diabetic. But as a 6-year-old,
yeah,
you definitely then felt included because you could be just like your big sister and you could just be like dad. So that's definitely it. What kind of challenges did you
find?
One
of the popular group.
Yeah. So we have just a little bit of a delay, so I apologize if I accidentally jump in or whatever. But what is it that you would say with you and with your family living with and impacted by diabetes so greatly? What would those big challenges be that you guys found the most difficult to manage?
So I think with that question, it's probably a bit of a few parts. So I think when you're younger and you're growing up, the part for you is that you don't get to do a couple things or eat the things that you want to eat because when I was growing up and starting school and things with diabetes, we didn't do carb counting or anything yet. So there was kind of like you had your long acting insulin and you had, I guess, Humulin R and Humulin N was basically what was given to you. And so you had to have specific times in your day where you take insulin and specific, parameters for your meals. And you didn't really get a whole lot of sway back and forth in what you were allowed to do. So my parents kind of, for example, there was one time in school where we all got to go and get slushies and things. And I got a great big one. And I guess one of my mom's coworkers saw me with it. And the whole conversation at home was, oh, there was something that you had today, wasn't there, that you shouldn't have had. And so those kind of things where your parents kind of have to direct what you're eating and direct what you're allowed to have. And as a kid, that really sucks because you don't get like the little candies here and there, and unless your blood sugar's low. The upside to it is that you get to eat in class, but yeah, there was that sort of thing. When we did get to learn to carb count, my whole brain thought was I get candy. And the other thing is, when your blood sugar goes low, your parents are waiting up at night sometimes to make sure that you're okay. And there's that huge worry that, is your family going to wake up in the morning, right? Because sometimes you don't feel your lows or you sleep through it. So there's a lot of big fears around that. I think growing up for me too is having two kids that are going through their teen years in kind of a denial of sorts, where you're not really truthful about your blood sugars and you're not really wanting to deal with it because you have so much more going on in your life. It's high school, right? And middle school. So there were a lot of struggles there, I think, for both, parents and being the kid. Like I was not in control of my blood sugars going through my teen years, and it would be skipping school to sleep because my blood sugar was high all the time, and, getting in trouble a lot because of that sort of thing. So, especially with people that have kids and going through that, that's a lot, like, especially for parents, because the kids are really pushing back on you, right? So there can be a lot of hardships that way. So I think that was mostly the biggest struggles we had. And especially, my dad's diabetic also. So she's kind of batting 3 tennis balls at a time, trying to make sure everybody's okay.
So, Bob, what I find, Shay, that you just shared is it's back to even what we talk about all the time. It's our mindset. It's that feeling of that we're being denied something, or that something's been taken away, or that we just don't want to look at those numbers all the time because they might say something bad about us or about our behavior, our performance, our choices. So can I say that you're basically saying that mindset around things in the family had to be structured because of diabetes, because the technology, when you were first diagnosed, when I was first diagnosed, it wasn't there where it is today. I don't get to, go here and go, oh, where's my blood sugar at? Scroll, there's the app. right? There's my blood sugar, right? I don't now. Back then, it was finger pricking. It was, making sure that it was so structured with your and your long-acting insulin that it was always a guessing game. Is a better way to put it, right? But ultimately, mindset was driving that. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I do. It's a lot of it. Mindset is a really hard thing to get over too. There's things that go on with your life and things that have trained your brain to be a certain way, right? So if, for instance, like, my dad was diagnosed, having to do these things, much like yourself. I think we've talked being diagnosed more as an adult and having to relearn how to work your life, right? So, and he's someone that's worked for years and years to make sure our family has, the funds to go, along with my mother too. Like they've done a lot to make sure they're in a place to, take care of everybody. And so for him at that age, young kids, this and that, it's a big thing to change your life and to change, like you said, that mindset. So we're working with kids that barely remember being without diabetes, and then adults that are also remembering a time, their youth almost, where they've had all that time to go, oh, this is different now. So it's two sides of a coin. And I know a lot of times we've talked about, would it be better to never remember life without being diabetic, or to be diagnosed later on when you've had a chance to live without it, right? So there's this big conversation with that, and I think of a lot of other people with that sort of question. And there's two different mindsets between each other in that sense too, right? So you're looking at a whole group of people that are either angry that they've been diagnosed, don't know anything different, so they're kind of wishing they would know that difference, or there's people that are kind of burnt out. And that's another thing too. Like there's so many facets we could go through with diabetes and how it affects you mentally or physically, and a lot of it is figuring out what works for you and how you can make it through.
One of the most important factors in mindset is what you know, what you learn, but also the people that you hang around with, right? You were probably quite lucky because there were so many diabetics in your family. I'm assuming there's quite a bit of support, certainly knowledge, right? But when you interact with people these days, especially in your age group, a lot of people seem to be isolated or alone. They're on their own journey, the diabetic journey. Are you aware of what would be your perspective on that, on keeping in touch or getting connected with other diabetics, or just learning more about diabetes? What happens?
So there are quite a few people that I've connected with. There's actually some pretty great Facebook groups too, where there's entire communities of people that have diabetes that can talk about it. There's people that go on there that are diagnosed a month ago that just have questions. And there's a whole bunch of conversation around relationships, even dating, that have to do with questions about how people would go about dating a person with diabetes or being with them, and what you need to know. And a lot of the information isn't quite as out there as a lot of people would like, until you've seen a lot of people that are famous now, say Nick Jonas, for example, who's type 1 diabetic, and he's interested and has moved forward to try and get more awareness out there. And when it's people that are alone, you're right, they don't have that support. They don't have the tools that I've had, especially having, 2-3 people in the same household that can share blood sugar strips and, get on each other about, checking your blood or taking care of yourself. When you're completely isolated and alone, that's a lot of work. That's hard too, because nobody's kind of understanding where you're coming from. Nobody feels the same lows that you do, or understands how, exhausting taking care of your blood sugars and taking care of everything else can be. And so like if your blood sugars are high all the time, you're exhausted, right? And if they're low all the time, you're exhausted. And then there's the time where they ping pong back and forth and you have no idea what you're going to do with yourself because,
Yeah.
again, you're exhausted. So with my sister and my dad, you can tell them about that and they'll understand it. And if you're alone and your family doesn't really understand that, they're like, oh, well, just get up. Come on. You know, they
Yeah, it's
don't
true.
get
No,
how that,
that's
yeah.
really true. So you brought up a point in that in your story, in the response here, that Bob and I were talking about before we came online, and that's generational differences. So my story, as you and I have known, as we learn, we met through a friend and through a community, and it's been a great journey. But one of the things that I find interesting is here I am. I'm in my 50s. I was diagnosed at 25 years old, right? So I experienced what you already shared, that life of independence, of great health and fitness and all these things. And then autoimmune deficiency, click, for whatever reason, there's a straw that broke the camel's back. And it doesn't always mean that we're to blame, right? Life happens, right? And now I'm dealing with this. Well, I'm being told I can't do things. And then in my era of people and my generation, most of them are very private. They almost look at it as a shame that I'm a diabetic versus, saying, no, I am a diabetic. This is, I can't change that. And taking some pride in the fact that, okay, I'm up to this challenge, i.e. my shirt, challenge accepted. Let's move forward with an attitude that's positive. What's good in this moment and how do I change, right? How does it work for you with your, friends in a different generation? How do you find that mindset, that attitude towards it? Is it one of shame? Is it one of, you know what, it is? Let us know.
So I think with certain people, and it's very few and far between now that I notice this, but certain people are kind of still in that mindset where they're like, oh, well, if you eat and do the exercise, you can reverse diabetes. And that's not even true in type 2 diabetes. From what I've talked with people regarding that, and it's a thing that is such a stigma even today, where you've done it to yourself, right? Or and that's where that shame's supposed to come from. And they've got lots of examples on TV where people joke about, oh, if I eat this, I'm going to be diabetic. But that it's one of those things where people either don't know enough about it to try and say anything and do anyways, or there's people that know a little bit about it. The thing that gets me the most is when people are sitting there and they're like, oh, my dog's diabetic, I get it. And it's like, oh, okay.
that is funny. I know what you mean on that one.
Yeah. And each person has differences in how it's going to affect them. There's people with more likelihoods of getting certain complications or issues. And I think even within the communities of healthcare workers and practitioners, there's a little bit of shame in if you're controlled or not. So endocrinologists will come and say, well, you're not doing good enough here. And that, regardless of the situation, the person that's being told that is going to be like, well, I'm doing what I can, or maybe they don't have the tools to figure out how to work their own systems out or their lifestyles, right? So there's a huge disconnect in information, even within our own communities, to figure out how we can help ourselves better. And sure. I noticed that a lot of people advocating and trying to get, people more up to speed on even just, if your blood sugar is low, don't give them insulin. That's sort of the thing that people are starting to kind of find out. My friends are all, a lot of them have sugary things in their purses and batteries, just in case if I have my pump on and it needs a battery. There's people like that are very, very supportive, and those are the people that are willing to learn that information. But there is a side of other people that are just not interested and want to speak before they learn some things. And I think it's just trying to gracefully move around that and find the people that are going to support you.
Power of proximity. Really.
generation. Yeah. Generation wise, I think it's become more of an accepted thing. I think a little more information has been brought forward. Because yeah, a lot of times it's older generations that are trying to tell you, oh well, if you do this, or oh, if you do that, then you wouldn't have done this to yourself. And it's like, oh, okay, thank you so much. Thank you. Not
And
to
there is
say
that fine
all
line too,
generations.
Bob, don't you think? When what you've shared is so important, because what you've really talked about is people don't always understand, and they try to throw accountability on, because we all need to be accountable, but sometimes the choices that we're making, we have to be accountable for in our life. That's true. So if I'm not exercising, I'm eating poorly, there are going to be consequences to that. And in the extreme case, diabetes is a result of mismanaging our health. But I do agree with you that that stigma that just because you're overweight means you're going to be a diabetic, that's wrong. The science supports the fact, though, that it's going to affect your insulin sensitivity, which will result in a consequence, but we don't know for sure. The point is good habits drive good results. How do we help each other to realize, as diabetics and people that aren't diabetics, because we can see things a little differently from being, technically, if you want to call it sick, right? Health is a crown only the sick can see. So we value things just a little bit differently. That's part of the mindset and generation of it. How do we actually work with these different views, these different age groups, to realize that together we can work together, learn together, and help those wherever they are on the journey? Because it really is a journey, diabetes, right? What are your thoughts on that, Bob? Shay?
Yeah, I mean, things with type 2 diabetes are also changing. I mean, a lot of times people will blame other people for their eating habits, again, weight wise, where they've also found that type 2 diabetes can also be in genetics also. So there's lots of questions that everybody has, and there's lots of learning that a lot of people can do. And I know that, nowadays there's so much that people want to make you learn about or understand, because there's so much misinformation everywhere. But if you do have someone that's in your family that is diabetic, or in your circle, there's lots of places you can find information. I mean, Diabetes Canada, there's JDRF, there's these videos that you guys thankfully do, to get people up to speed or to understand what's happening with other people. I think it's just a lot of shame has been put on people, especially because of ignorance. And it's happened to me a lot. It's happened to family members. I can't get over the if you eat a table or a teaspoon of cinnamon or something, you'll be cured. So
Yeah.
there's just I
Lots
think it
of
all
lots of
boils down to
myths,
misinformation.
lots of myths out there, and lots of data or education that's not true. That's for sure. The internet's populated with that sort of stuff. But you found some true. Oh, go ahead.
Oh no, sorry. I was just gonna say, even the thing saying, don't go to WebMD if you have a cold or something, because you're not going to like what it comes up with. It's one of those things, but they still trust the internet for getting information out that may be incorrect.
I love what you're saying, because you're saying that it's a real challenge for a diabetic to actually find the truth, right? Find the knowledge that's actually correct, but also for themselves, because everybody's unique. And maybe you can share with us some of the things you do to manage your diabetes, and some of the routines you have, your morning routines, your afternoon routines, how you get enough rest, recovery, how you fit in your activities, and perhaps some hints for nutrition and eating. Things that you do would be really fun to hear.
Really good.
Yeah, for sure. So I have the Libra sensor. So they've come up with the Libra sensor 2, which is really great. And it does the same thing kind of the Dexcom does. It gives you a little notification if your blood sugar's up or down. And so in the morning, I always end up being a little bit lower than the rest of the day. So there's that little kind of dawn period. I think they call it the dawn phenomenon.
Yeah.
So I have to be really careful about what I eat at the night time, or, you know, how much insulin I take at that time, because it will directly influence how my blood sugar comes up in the morning. I'm a person that kind of likes consistency. So I have a lot of similar meals as I go. Like I'll have my shake and eggs and stuff in the morning, and I know what the carbohydrates of that are already. So it's really easy to just kind of get my 3 or 4 units and do it, and then, you know, eat my food. It's the same with lunch and dinner. A lot of the time I like just knowing what it is so that it's easy enough to know, okay, well, this is very consistent. This is all that I'm going to have in the day. That, you know, obviously people like to go out and have food at restaurants, things like that. But for me, I like the preparedness of it all. And I do like to eat out. And there's other things online that can tell you the carbohydrates and everything that you do. So if there are those extra times that you want to go do that, you can do it easy. I'm very terrible at guesstimating my blood sugars and the insulin stuff. So I tend to just want to know what it is. And then, if I'm stressed out, that's going to change my blood sugar. So sleep's important. You know, you're going to get more stressed out and more frustrated with your blood sugars and all of that if you're not sleeping well. And I've had a terrible time with sleep in my past. So for me, it's, you know, giving myself a curfew and giving myself the time to de-stress and let myself watch a TV show at night and go to bed without that. Because if I'm not thinking about what my blood sugars are, and I'm not thinking about all the other stresses in my day, then I'm going to fall asleep easier, right? The other thing is, if your blood sugars aren't in line, if they're high and low all the time or ping-ponging, you're going to be exhausted at the wrong times, and you're going to be wide awake at the wrong times. So it's the same thing with health and exercise. If you're not getting enough sleep and you're not getting the right nutrition, your body's not going to work and fuel itself the right way. So for me, it's all about consistency. And I know that's the worst thing sometimes for people to want to hear, because not a lot of people like consistency. But it's the same thing with working out. It's getting that routine down, and then it's almost like your diabetes and what you're working with becomes, you know, your second mindset, instead of always being at the forefront of your mind. So instead of, you know, being like, oh, blood sugars all the time, and that being the thing that burns you out and makes you not want to check your blood and not do the needles and, you know, not set your pump up right, it turns it into more of a secondary action than actually being the thing you're concerned about all the time. So that cortisol is not running in your brain, and you're not stressing out all the time, right? If I've made that sound any clearer.
No, that's really good, actually. I love those. I love those perspectives. I'm just wondering, we're going deeper into winter. Is there different times of the year affect you differently?
Yeah, summer makes me run lower. I'm more active in summer too, right? It's hotter. There's been studies that show that hotter weather actually makes your blood sugar a little bit lower at times, which is an interesting thing to see. Wintertime, I'm holed up. I'm eating soup. I'm not doing a lot of exercise, so my blood sugars tend to run a little bit higher. They tend to not crazy, but if you're not watching it, it can jump up there, right? But yeah, wintertime's kind of the worst in blood sugar wise for me, if I would say anything, because you are less active. It's when people hide inside and they want to eat the Christmas stuff and the candies and the so I would go with that for sure. And I like candy a lot. So
in your diabetes management, is there anything that you're extra specially good at, or you're bang on right now?
Superpower.
Like you have a superpower there. And on the reverse side, is there anything that you are not consistent with, you constantly struggle with?
Okay, so I think I've got my meal plans and eating down pat for my consistency wise. for the base of it. For me, everyone that I know will probably tell you that I absolutely love candy. And I think in my brain, it's because I didn't get to have it a lot when I was a kid. So every time there's something in the house that is like candy, and if you're watching, to my friends that bought me a ridiculous amount of dinosaurs, it kills me because my biggest problem is eating the candy and I can't stop it. So I take large amounts of insulin, and a lot of times it's not correct. So I'll kind of flip flop. So I have to watch myself with candy and junk food because I am bad, very bad.
It begins the roller coaster, right? It totally begins the roller coasters. Like yours, you take jubes away or M&Ms. Don't bring them in the room.
Yeah. And if you're a foodie of any sort, you have to be careful because, you're sitting there with these beautiful dishes of food. And, I love to cook and I love to make things and stare at people as they eat my food because I want them to be like, it's really good. And then I want to, eat the good food and do the good things. And so I'm guessing my terrible part is, when you're eating things like heavy starches, potatoes, pizzas are really hard fun for people I've noticed that have diabetes, pasta, those sorts of things. They give you a bit of a roller coaster in your blood sugars because some foods will give you a short span of where your blood sugar is going to spike, and other foods will kind of elongate. So it will be a little bit of a spike and then it'll go down and then spike later. And that's what I'm still kind of figuring out a little more. And that's kind of my biggest kryptonite, I guess you'd say.
Well, that's the prime example. You think of nuts, right? I love nuts. And it's exactly that delayed sugar, right? Because it's all this protein that's mixed in with some very minimal amounts of carbs, the salt, love that. But the point is that you eat it and it's like you said, it's just a little bit of an increase. It's nothing. It's sort of normal. No biggie. And then 3 hours later, whoosh, all those carbs, because everything gets turned to glucose, is now going up in there at a delayed onset. So you've spoken some really good truths here that really resonate.
A question: how did you get your your food down pat? Did you use any special apps, or how did you learn that? Because eating properly and regularly and snacking and that sort of things—that's a real skill.
I took the long way around and I kind of researched and checked all the carbohydrates on the side of the nutrition info for everything that I've been eating. And because I'm trying to get into a routine where it's, eat, work, gym, paint, like it's very, I just kind of individually took everything and found the carb info and then put it all together and then decided, okay, this is what I've got for this meal. This is what I've got for that meal. But, for people that don't want to do that and for people that are looking for kind of an easier way to go around that, again, websites, apps, even the allrecipes.com is one that I use for making food that I really like. And it has a lot of nutrition info sometimes. Or there's even ones that are directly with fast food chains have nutrition info all the time now too. So if you're looking to not change your lifestyle a whole lot, most places actually have to give their nutrition info to you. Again, although All Recipes is a site that also has people posting recipes, I wouldn't be hard pressed to say that there is also some lack in nutrition info there sometimes. But yeah, there's even books. I remember as a kid, I think it was called like Food King or something, and they had entire books with nutrition info. So if you want to find it, it's there. It's just a matter of a couple clicks and some typing.
I think what you said kind of you slipped it in there so brilliant. You said, I'm trying to eat, work, out, and paint. And that's gold, because most people don't think about their days like that. I know this man right here, and I do as well. Like I've got a gym workout scheduled for today at 4 o'clock, right? What time do you work out almost every day?
Usually around 3.
Yeah. So it's like that's locked into our days. That's literally locked into our almost every day, right? That workout time, and then the work part is all scheduled as well. And then you said painting, which is your passion. You're creating
Yes.
a passionate moment in your day, right, or in your week for sure. A lot of people leave that out. They don't take care of themselves.
That's right.
And make sure that they're doing what they're passionate about. And I love the fact that you're thinking about eating. Well, of course, we're thinking about eating to make sure all that stuff can happen too. But that's just the concept of planning, right? Mapping it out.
That's right. And I think just it leads to a really good point you and I talked about, and something that I want you to share on here is these routines, right? I say this all the time, that chance favors a prepared mind, right? If you fail to plan, you plan to fail. But the fact is, you said something powerful, that our purpose helps us to cope, in a conversation you and I had just a couple of days ago. And I think that that's something I'd love you to share about. How does your passion, painting, fitness, the things that you've just explained to us, help you cope and to manage your busy lifestyle and live with diabetes?
Yeah, so I really 100% believe that that's the biggest catalyst for anybody's reasoning to do anything is a purpose. And so whether it be to make someone happy, to make yourself happy, or to make yourself feel like there's a direction in your life, you have to incorporate that into whatever structure you have. And that's why I think a lot of people burn out sometimes, is they kind of take out the passion and creativity in their life and try and completely structure their entire lives that way. And when you're sitting there with this structure that is great and good and all, you're not giving yourself the ability to kind of mix it up in your life. You're not giving yourself that mental break to discover your creative side or your imagination or the things that truly make you happy. Just because you have diabetes, it doesn't mean your entire life has to be around it. It just means that you have to consider it in what you're doing. So here's a kind of a weird but funny story. Is my mom's also a painter. She's a fabulous artist. I learned everything from her. And one time she took my blood sugar test strips, and they were all used ones, because I don't know if you guys do this, but I used to have test strip bottle A and test strip bottle B, and one of them was used test strip bottles. And she took those and put them in her painting, and I was super creeped out, but she's like, it's a masterpiece. And it just had all these test strips on it, and it kind of reminds me that it's just everything's so messy. And it's like the same with like paintings. They're messy, but they've got the colors and the brightness and those little kind of twinkles of light in your life that otherwise would just make everything mundane, and you'd be indifferent to everything. It's the same walking in nature or hiking and see things moving on without your presence even being needed there, and realizing you're the presence that you need there. You're the thing that you need to move on forward. So
that's gold.
When you're looking, and when you're thinking of things like that, then the structures and those things again become second nature, and you can decide all the other things you want to put into your life and install there to really fill out that life cycle. So instead of being that person that goes, oh, I hate my life, I'm diabetic, this is the worst, you kind of just turn it into something else. You turn it into something that's more like, okay, this is what I have, this is what I'm dealing with, but this is my life. This isn't. This is just something that sustains it. Yeah. Right.
This is such gold, Shay, that you're sharing, because life really is art. It really is about creating the life that we want, right? That's, I know, what we're really focused on. And we've had lots of talks with you about UD, our community, our programs. But how do we predict our future? We have to create it. We have to be the artist of our life, like you're saying. So whether it's what your mom's doing and accepting and embracing the diabetes and using the used test strips, because they actually symbolize little moments and sparkles, as you said, where you paused, where you looked, and we're missing sometimes in our life, those little pauses, those realizations that what we're passionate about, those things are gifts to us. Where did that come from, right? The point is, your passion for art, your ferociousness in wanting to support other people, i.e., being here today, the other things you're doing with CDA, and I can go on with the list. Those things are the sparkles that we can do by giving to others. We grow, we help others grow in their knowledge and understanding. And then ultimately, we all get to work together, right? In trying to make something better. And I think that's really important part is community you're talking about. It's really like art. It's all of us coming together and realizing we're not alone, that together we can create this uncommon diabetic life. So I'm really curious now, with your passion, you're taking this and you're applying it in so many colorful ways. And one of them is, i.e., supporting and advocating for organizations like the Canadian Diabetes Association, like Uncommon Diabetic Solutions, and our programs and others. How are you using your art and what you're doing to help you advocate for diabetes and for nature? Share a little bit about that for you, for all of us.
So with my artwork, I'm hoping to eventually get to the point where I can start donating portions of my funding to people or organizations that are helping people struggle with diabetes. That's my main goal. And again, portions of my artwork to at-risk wildlife and things like that. I have a lot of interest in nature and wildlife, given my kind of really lucky upbringing in kind of a very small town where, again, like you said, bears would frequent our yard. Like, we had a cul-de-sac where there was a moose one day, and everybody's like, oh, okay, there's just a moose in our yard. So I was really lucky. I was probably one of the closer to the end generations that got to go out and play and then come home when the sun goes down. So preserving what nature has to offer, even including creatures that don't have the luxury of being in abundance, it's kind of close to my heart a little bit. And with diabetes, we've been through so much, our family, with hard low blood sugars, or just trying to feel like the other person's safe. If someone's blood sugars are out of line, you get worried for them, right? You can tell sometimes when people are running high all the time, because you can see that there's sometimes there's weight loss, or there's this just general fatigue, and I don't know if you've seen it before, but there's people I've seen that have really high blood sugars all the time, and they'll eat and eat and eat, but they will never, excuse me, I'm sorry, gonna cough. They'll never gain any weight back because their blood sugars are always high, right? So they can eat as much as they want and drink as much, but there's just no nutrition going into their body. And so watching people and, going through what I did as a teenager, it wasn't healthy. And it put you in a bad place. A lot of times diabetics also have a high risk for depression. And so it's just, one of those things that, again, it's very close to me. So I want to be able to support people in that, even if it comes in the form of awareness, or even support for people to comment or message to me, or even if it's just, making a painting that can help a little bit. Right. So it's again, kind of aligning with my core values of helping the people that are in the same sort of boat as me, or helping creatures that I know need that help.
Yeah, I love you. I love both your comments on the power of purpose. But I know many people, some in their 60s, their 40s, their 30s, lots in their 20s, that are searching.
Yeah.
And you can go through life with passion and lose it too, and have to recreate it. So maybe both your perspectives on how your perspectives and your advice on how does a person find purpose? How does a person find passion? Like that's for some people, that's they haven't found it. It's a mystery. It's like, what is my purpose? What is my passion?
So Shay, why don't you start, and then I'll give my 2 bits on this. This is a great question. How do you deal with that for yourself?
So one part of that, I think, is, especially as people with diabetes go through burnout a lot. And that can last for years even, right? So if you are going through this unstable life of trying to figure out what makes you happy and not, and you go into that burnout, nothing really gives you any sort of inspiration to find a purpose or to find something that affects you in a way that makes you want to move or to get up and do something. And I think that that's hand in hand again with depression, and talking to people and finding people that you really enjoy talking with, or even just trying things, maybe even new things that you didn't realize you loved that much, right? Like painting was never my thing until I realized that I absolutely loved it. And I found out that I seemed to have a little bit of skills crossed over from sketching and pastel and things that I absolutely did love. And I stopped doing art for a while before that. You know, I stopped doing everything because I was just exhausted and depressed. You know, my A1C was, I think, 13 at some point, and that's pretty high. So that's the other thing. If your blood sugars are really high all the time, you're not looking for that, right? You're not interested in a purpose because you don't feel like there is one. It's the same as you said, you know, what's the point? What's the point of being, you know, caring about it or caring about you as a person, you know? And I think the very first step is just trying to get your blood sugars in line. Once you feel that inclination to do that again, then do it, or just try and push yourself to that. And I know it's hard to push yourself in any respect when you're in those places. But it's trying to get out of that again, that mindset, right? There's a mindset that, and it's not wrong to be in that mindset. It's just finding ways that you enjoy or that you think are important to get you out of that mindset. So, you know, even caring for something so small as a plant can help people decide that they want to do more with their lives or do more in circumstances that otherwise would have left them alone or different, right? So for me, when I was in a burnout, the biggest part of trying to take care of myself was, you know, I started thinking I can make these paintings into something I can put all of my anger and emotion into. Or, you know, even if I'm having a good time, I can put it on a painting. I can make something, you know, beautiful for other people to look at. And that gave me a purpose because I'm producing something that people are finding interesting or people are finding emotion in, right? So you're connecting with people on a different level. And I think finding a connection with other people, or, you know, even if you have pets and animals, things like that, finding those connections will give you a purpose too. The only thing that I want to say is that I know how hard that is to get out of though, right? So I don't have any direct answer to what can give a person purpose other than to keep looking for it and keep telling yourself that there is one somewhere.
I really just love your honesty, your
Yes.
transparency there. Thanks so much for sharing that. I mean, so many people go through exactly what you're going through. So to hear that, it's really inspiring. Thanks so much, Shay. But what about you, my friend? What's your thoughts on this purpose, this difficult thing to grasp, to find your passion? Do you have any suggestions or advice?
Well, I really resonate with you, Shay, and everything you've been talking about today. We speak a very similar language. That's why I call you an uncommon diabetic, because our purpose, I think, is very aligned in the sense that my purpose is to empower people living with and impacted by diabetes as well. But diabetes really is a journey. And for me, it's one of the things that we teach in our programs. It's what I really believe and what I've learned from almost 30 years of living with it is that if you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there. It's that simple, right? So we need to be clear and be able to lay down just a very simple, what's the result I want? And today, it might literally just be make one step forward. And there's days where I feel completely overwhelmed with trying to do what we're trying to do. And I go, how is this possible? Well, what's the one thing right now that I can do that by doing it, it's going to make everything else easier or unnecessary? And that's a great book, by the way, The One Thing. That's where I just learned that. And I think that creating a map with a very clear purpose and then breaking it backwards into basic, easy steps, because I can't jump to the top of the staircase unless it's a really short staircase in one go. But I can go focus on the first step. And now I'm there. I learned something, right? I've made some mistakes maybe along the way, but to fail isn't a bad thing. We've both talked about this. That's a fantastic adventure, learning, getting to the next step. And then from there, how do we do that? It's take the next step. So I'm very philosophical about it, but the truth is we have to create a map, a massive action plan that starts with the end in mind. So what Shay said is so true. Start with your passion. Passion is the critical ingredient to success of anything. It's to overcoming any obstacle, right? That passion, what helps us face our fears. I know for me, I have lots of fears. The fear, the one that most of us is, well, what are other people going to think? What if I fail? Well, those are lies, right? So that's something that I really want to resonate as somebody that has failed a lot in my journey as a diabetic. I've had days where my sugars have hit 25 because I completely forgot to bolus. I forgot to do my injection after eating a dessert of all things, right? I get excited. I'm in the moment. I'm with people. And then 30 minutes later, I feel like a sack of what, like just I'm yawning, I'm tired, I'm thirsty, I'm just, well, any of you have experienced it. You don't even have to be a diabetic to know what it's like to have a sugar coma, right? When you've overdone it. It's just more exemplified with diabetes. So this leads back to the point of purpose. Our goal as people is just to improve. It's to learn. And I think to journey with others is probably the most valuable lesson that I've learned in my life. And that's the power of proximity, of community. To do what we're doing here right now, Shay, I've learned an immense amount. You've affirmed things that I believe. You've put some new thoughts into me that I can think about, that have challenged me, and to be humble so that I can go to anybody. It doesn't matter of age. It doesn't matter whatever, but as diabetics, we can help each other. Because I don't know what Shay knows. And Shay doesn't know what I know. But if we share, we get the sum of that. That only happens in community. So the long-winded way, focus on our passion and surround ourselves with people that are aligned with that passion. It's going to make us stronger. It's going to help us move forward. So that's my long-winded way of saying it, but what are your guys' thoughts on that?
Well, I think passion doesn't have to be your work too, right? So a lot of people think my passion has to be my work, when I'm thinking that it can be a recreational pursuit that may turn into work, but it doesn't have to be work. I know Heath's an exemplary golfer. He's a fantastic golfer. This is one of his passions. And
Any day
he wishes it was a professional pursuit, but he's not good enough.
I'm not good enough.
He's an amazing golfer. Like, he's a scratch golfer, but he's not good enough to be a pro. But it's a passion. And he works on it all the time. It gives him great joy. And your art as well, right? But I think you sell your art as well, Shay?
I do, yeah. I kind of juggle a full-time job and then 4 or 5 hours at artwork most days.
So you're kind of working towards that. That might become. You're taking your passion maybe to the next level, which is great.
Yeah, well, and I mean, the other thing too is, I know that a lot of people, especially who are either new to diabetes or, have talked to people that might not understand the struggle so well. A high blood sugar feels shameful a lot of the time for people, right? Like, you're in your 20s and you're like, oh, I'm a terrible person, or I'm a terrible diabetic, which is how how do you decide that you're terrible at anything if this is something you've been given to deal with, right? So, I mean, you got to be able to laugh at yourself, you know, if you've had a little bit of a low where you're like, oh, my blood sugar is really high right now. You don't have to hate yourself for it, right? You just keep moving on. So just make sure people know that you're not supposed to hate yourself because you're not having the best day, right? So maybe that might just be the smallest step to not losing your passion for your life, right?
You know, I think our time is coming to a close here shortly, but I wanted to ask you a couple quick questions for you to share with us and all of the people that will been watching this, as well as will watch this online. If you could give a person one thing, the best tip you can give on how to balance a busy life with diabetes, what would you tell them?
Well,
you can say more than one thing, but in the one thing.
One thing, that's all I'm allowed. Honestly, I think balancing a busy life, it comes down to making sure that you're putting time for yourself in first and foremost, and you're not wavering on those things for you. So you can have all the busyness you want in your life. Just make sure you have at least a little sliver cut out for yourself, you know, get the fuzzy socks, get the, you know, the air fryer or something, get something for you that you want to do, or, you know, take the time to paint, or if what you do enjoy is exercising, go and do that. Don't put everything into your schedule that is for another purpose. You just got to focus on yourself sometimes. And I think that's what happens. People need to make sure of that.
And I love that as a hint. I would build on that by saying that there's 168 hours in the week, and what is the number of hours that you would like to put towards yourself each and every week? To actually put a number on that is a critical part of the planning process. So
Yeah.
I've got sleep hours, recreation hours, time with the wife hours, time with the kids hours. That's how I break my week up, and that's really important. Self-care, the self-care hours are there as well. Yeah.
Intelligent
if people
selfishness. That's what you just explained.
you got to be selfish. If you think about it this way, every single act in the world is sort of selfish in a certain way. It doesn't mean it's a bad thing. Selfishness shouldn't be a bad word, you know, unless you're ridiculously selfish. But you know, it's the same thing as saying, you know, if someone cares about you, they'll make the time for you. So why aren't we thinking about that with ourselves, right? If we care about ourselves, why aren't we making that time? You know. So.
Well, I think you said something there. It's pretty strong. And I'm not going to go into a whole lesson. We teach this in our course, but it's all about the human needs. We all have, every one of us has the same needs of feeling certain, feeling significant, feeling loved and connected, needing adventure, growing and giving. Those are the 6 needs. But the truth is, each one of us is unique in the combinations and order of them. So I think what you've said is we need to be true to ourselves and know what those needs are. And the way that we talk a lot about it is you got to put the big rocks in the glass first. That's another story in itself. But the point is really be clear on those big rocks that matter to us all and put them in. Would that be a good summary of that?
Yeah, I think so.
Excellent. So Shay, how do people learn more about you, about your art and the causes, and where can people find you?
So I'm on Facebook. I've got a YouTube channel. So Facebook, it's just Shae Ayris Art. Instagram, it's at Shae_Ayris. And on Facebook, you can even find the link that shows my YouTube channel where I have free art classes. And those are, and my website obviously is www.shaeayrisart.com. And so those are the most frequently used to find information about me, to message me. Even if it's a question about diabetes, if you're new to it or if you've got kids with it, you know, always happy to answer and give some support if anybody needs it. I know I have had people comment and send me messages over my webpage or even just my Facebook messaging to ask questions. Always happy with that. So.
Well, guys, I can tell you, Shay is definitely uncommon. She's got wisdom beyond her years, eh, Bob? I think that the what I call uncommon sense, right, that you possess for and that you've shared with us in the diabetic world is important, right? And we're all on a unique journey together. So for all of you watching, check Shae out. Her art is phenomenal. I love it. And I think it's something that you could do. I've watched even some of her courses. You will not go wrong visiting any of Shay's social media website or checking out her programs. So I really want to thank you, Shae, for joining us today. And I have just a few things that I need to say here, guys, is that I don't know if you guys watching today are experiencing the challenges of living with diabetes and you're just at a moment where your mindset's struggling, right? Or you're off track in your eating, you're just not working out, you're having a really hard time just slowing down so you can sleep. The world's racing. Well, if you're struggling with weight loss or you're struggling with any of the 4 pillars that we will teach in our courses, I really want you to know that together we can. We can help you lose weight. We can help you find the right diet and eat correctly. As Shae was talking about, carb counting, the simple techniques, but most importantly, how do we combine all the 4 pillars of health, the way we think, the way we eat and drink, exercise, and then recover and rest? It's critical. So I want to invite you, right, to take advantage of our free uncommon offers. And you can locate those at uncommondiabetic.com. But I want to talk to you about 1 minute is about our free Transform workshop. Join me this Thursday at 4 p.m. and learn those 4 pillars. Learn how we can help create the foundations and live an uncommon diabetic life. You know, together we can. It's about getting in proximity. It's about joining a community of diabetics, working with and helping diabetics. That's what we're about. Together we can. So I really want to thank you, Shae, again. I want to thank you, Bob, as always, for helping, facilitate. He keeps me on track. I get so much energy and sometimes I can squirrel down the rabbit hole. But the truth is that together we're doing a great job and we really are looking forward to the opportunity of working with you again, Shae. We appreciate all the support you give us with Uncommon Diabetic Solutions. And I'm just very grateful. Until we see you guys next week. Sorry, go ahead, Shae.
Oh, no, I was going to say thank you too.
Yeah, no, I'm so grateful. So until we see you next week, guys, on UDTV, be uncommon.
Thanks, Shae.
Thanks.
Thanks, everybody, for joining us.